Yeah. What's something that interesting you mentioned like before is like I think you were saying you were studying like Mandarin, right?
Yeah. I really I think language is a beautiful thing. Like written language as well as spoken language. It can come in um it can express itself in so many different ways, right? Like um just like you speak Urdu, right? And so that's
Yeah.
written with abjad, right? And I predominantly speak English, right? That's written with alphabet, right? And you
Yeah.
have Mandarin, which is written with what is it? Uh, I'm blanking on the term for whatever it is, what the writing system is called, right? But it's written with symbols as opposed to these characters which encode actual like sound value, right? So like
Yeah.
I'm learning Mandarin right now, and so like sometimes I'll look at something and I'll read it and be like, oh, I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I know a little bit of Mandarin, you know, like I know the tones that are in this word, like I can recognize, I know exactly what's being said here, right? And other times I can look at like a page and I'll be like, I just I have nowhere to start. Like it's not that I can't like even if I learned like the Urdu script, right? I could with an accent recreate the sounds a little bit, you know? Like I could probably get across, at least I could like read out the sounds and you could probably be like, oh, okay, he's saying this poorly, but he's saying
Yeah.
this, right? But with Mandarin, I can look at a page and have absolutely zero idea of how to realize like the phonetic content of it, you know?
Oh, really?
And also it can be like, okay, not only do I not know how this sounds or what it means, but because it's not written out like a word here or a word here, it's just kind of like it's a collection of different radicals. It's really hard to search for what does this mean.
Yeah.
They're kind of just like, oh no, I don't know what that means. I'll
You
have
know
to.
what's really cool that you mentioned is how when you're reading Chinese you don't know if it's phonetical or not, right?
Right.
And one thing I realized is that when you speak English, right? And then let's if you speak another language, and you'll realize how inconsistent English actually is.
For
It's
sure.
like grammatical rules, but most of the languages, just in general, tend to be a lot more consistent.
100%. 100%.
That's what I realized, and it's like I guess in a way it's kind of like I don't know if I should say it's a flaw of the English language, but one thing it's like so inconsistent that now when I think about it, it's like it kind of makes sense why some people will struggle with learning English because the rules just don't add up all the time.
For sure. For sure. And that like, the funny that you bring that up, that's actually part of the reason why I started learning Mandarin as opposed to some other languages. Like, strangely enough, I'm actually finding learning Mandarin right now significantly easier than I was finding learning things like Spanish in school. Because of,
Really?
like you mentioned, not because the rules are inconsistent, like the rules of Spanish pronunciation are pretty clear, right? There's not too
Yeah.
much questions. There's like dialectical variation, like we also like in my like variation of Spanish, say azul, right? Whether in like Spain, Spanish, say azul, right? It's like slight
Yeah.
variations here and there with pronunciation, but like it's basically the same. Um, but they have a lot of conjugation in languages, like I ran, like you're running, he did run, we will run, like all of these like different changes that you can do, like correr, corremos, corren,
Yeah.
corro, right? Corra, right? Different like conjugations, and they all mean different. They won't mean the same thing, but different things like in the context, right? Whereas with Mandarin Chinese, there is much less of that. There's no like I, me distinction, I, me, my, right? You, your. And there's also something that I find is really cool. Like, you know how in English, you can say like, you can mean like you singular, or it can mean you multiple, right?
Yeah.
Um, in Chinese, they simplify that a lot, right? It's like in Chinese, in Mandarin, you would be ni, right? And if you say you multiple, ni men, right? So it's like it takes that ambiguity out of what you're talking about, right? You're saying like me, or you can say if you say like me, but a lot, you're saying we, um, or like I don't know. I'm probably gonna go off a little tangent. Like it's really cool how different languages handle different things. Like there are some uh, was Aboriginal languages, like in what is it, Oceania, right? Where they do not have like left, right, forward, backward stuff like this.
Yeah,
They do cardinal directions at all times, right?
really.
So like it's like okay, this is my west hand and this is my east hand, and I'm looking north and I'm like not looking south, right? And like now this is my south hand and this is my north hand, and right, this kind of weird stuff is keeping track of it all the time.
You know, it's interesting to mention that because at least in Urdu, it's like the word for left isn't really left, it's opposite.
Huh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really
So it's like
interesting.
you'll have right, um, which in Urdu is like sida, right? And then um and then for left it would technically be ulta, which means like left, right?
Mhm.
Which it literally translates to opposite.
That's so cool. What the
Yeah.
heck? I like it whenever there are things like that. Like speaking of words connecting us, and I think you brought up Hungary a second ago. Uh,
Yeah.
Hungarian is actually uh, a language isolate in Europe, if I'm not mistaken. Meaning like it does not have it's not related to the families the languages around it.
Really.
It's actually an agglutinative language, if I'm not mistaken, which means that instead of parsing together different words to make a sentence that like conveys what you're meaning, you have a lot of prefixes and suffixes and infixes that you combine to make really long words that convey your meaning. So you get like these really just short sentences with very small amounts of words, but just ginormous groups of characters.
I mean, I'm not familiar with like the Hungarian language, but based off of what you're telling me, I'm assuming it has pretty long words.
Yeah.
Um,
Kind of like have you ever seen that Welsh, I think it is. A really long Welsh word. It's like it's the name of a place.
oh yeah, I know Welsh. Yeah.
Oh, tight. I don't remember what it's called. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but it's like the world's longest place name. I remember
Oh,
the last
I
three
think I've
words
seen
like
the meme.
go
Yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of interesting how some names can be very.
Certainly.
Yeah, I know you're studying like Mandarin, obviously, but are there what languages do you plan on studying?
Um, I would like to. I'm studying Mandarin right now as like a kind of a compromise. I wanted to study Cantonese, so hopefully after I get better at Mandarin, I get semi almost kind of fluent maybe. I'll try to push my way into Cantonese. Um, I've thought about studying Thai. Um, what scared me off of Thai until recently is that again Thai is a tonal language, and up until I made the plunge to studying Mandarin, I had been very hesitant to study tonal languages just because I'm not used to that. English is not a tonal language. Spanish is not a tonal language. Um, so I'm just, and because it's not necessarily the tones that have scared me off of Thai, but it's the fact that it has nine tones and that they are pitch specific. So, like in Mandarin, there are five tones. One of those tones is an empty tone, so you can just say ma. It's just empty. You don't have to worry about the inflection, right? And then the other four are, for the most part, just rough uh, gestures, right? You have like your high neutral tone ma, you have your high falling tone ma, your low rising tone ma, and your falling rising tone ma, right? And ma, right? Just empty. But it doesn't matter what notes you're on, really. If you want to learn Cantonese or Thai, it does matter. So you're like ma or ma, right? Two different words.
Really? Okay.
Even though they're the same tone gesture, because they had a different tone start and different tone end, it changes the tone.
So it's kind of interesting how complex languages can be sometimes.
Certainly, certainly. And I think that like they sacrifice all the conjugation of like correr, corrando, corro, corras, corre, right? With just tones, like that, the different, like the brain is spent doing other things. Speaking of language complexity, I don't know if you're aware of Tibetan. It's really strongly related to Sanskrit, and they use a lot of historical spelling, so a lot of stuff that calls back to Sanskrit. But it's written like in Sanskrit, but it's not pronounced like in Sanskrit.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Um, but I've heard it, and it's one of like the weirdest, like most inconsistent, like spelling to pronunciation languages in the world.
Really?
Because it's super like historical, the way it's spelled is ancient, 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 ancient.
Hold on.
Um,
What I
but
do know is that like Hindi is like the script is based off of Sanskrit.
yeah, 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 yeah. I'm not sure if the Tibetan is like based off of script or if like they try to hold really to the original script. I don't know, but I've heard a hypothesis that because they're living in that higher altitude and they're getting used to living at that higher altitude, their brains are better at processing the oxygen up there, so they have more brain power to use for a more difficult language. I don't know how true that is, but I've heard it.
Interesting. I don't know how true that is, but I do know that living up there can like improve oxygen intake if I'm not mistaken.
Right, 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 yeah.
Yeah. You know what's actually kind of interesting that I heard that ancient languages are more complex than like newer languages. And I
Mhm.
found that very interesting because you would assume that newer languages would be more complex, but it's actually the other way around.
Right,
I
right,
heard that
right.
humans tend to simplify things.
Certainly, certainly,
Yeah,
certainly. That's like I don't know if you've ever looked back and like I've never tried to learn Latin, but I've like given a couple goes at like familiarizing myself a little bit with Latin, and man, it's hard. There's like
yeah,
even more conjugation, so much more conjugation. It's difficult, and like a Greek also like there's a lot more emphasis on like vowel length and vowel stress. Like I don't know if they have this in Urdu, but like they have it a little bit in I think Spanish. Like uh what's a good one? Perro versus perro, right? Perro,
oh,
perro, perro, right? Um, uh, but like we have to elongate a vowel or shorten a vowel to change the meaning of a word.
yeah. I don't. I can't think of a. There probably is. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now.
For sure, for sure. I hate it when that happens.
Yeah,
Especially whenever I started learning languages and studying languages more, that started happening to me all the time. Where I started going, "What's the word? What's that word I'm thinking of in the language that I speak?" I
yeah,
suddenly don't know how to speak the language that I speak.
yeah. No, I feel you. Yeah, it's one thing that makes me wonder because we're talking about Latin and Sanskrit, right? Which are technically like two languages that are dead, but we still know how they're spoken, right?
Right,
But it makes me wonder how languages that are dead, but we don't even know how they were pronounced or anything. Like,
right.
for example, like the ancient Egyptian like hieroglyphs and how they might have spoken at some point, right?
Certainly, certainly. Or like drawing it just because I'm a China nerd, drawing it back to like the Chinese characters, right? Go back far enough, and you're just like, how is this? There's literally no phonetic information in this. They're like, how do I
Yeah,
pronounce this? And like the country, like I'm sure it's like similar to this with like India because it's such a massive country. Like things are pronounced differently everywhere, you know.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, the funny thing in India, I think it's the one place with the most languages.
I wouldn't be
If I'm
surprised.
not
Yeah,
mistaken.
that makes sense.
Yeah. And there's like what, like over like I could be wrong here on the number, but I think it's like over 800. I think yeah, it's like
That's
crazy.
crazy. That's so
Yeah,
cool. I wonder, like, I wonder if there are people there that like. I wonder how many they speak. You know, like how many is like the average? I'm sure like just one or two probably, but I'm sure there are some people who have learned disparate ones. Like I don't know, like I have an acupuncturist named Frank Liu, and he was a surgeon back in China. But then he when he immigrated here, his credentials did not allow him to practice medicine over here, so he just did traditional Chinese medicine. But he speaks like four or five or six just Chinese languages or dialects aside from English and Spanish or whatever. It's like
yeah,
I'm sure there are some crazy polyglots over there that just know
yeah.
everything.
No, that's true. Yeah, yeah, like learning languages is like an amazing thing, honestly.
Certainly.
I've personally not looked into Eastern Asian like languages,
Mhm.
but I've looked into like I guess you could call it like the Middle Eastern or like that area of like India and like I obviously like some Latin languages,
Certainly.
but I just thought it was way too complex.
For sure, man. That's why I started learning Mandarin because like, oh, all these romance languages are so hard. I need something
Yeah,
easier.
yeah. No, I'm sure like for someone that has like no idea, like I guess like a language like Urdu might be really hard, right?
Right.
But like it's just that I happen to speak it, so something like I guess like Farsi or Arabic would be a little easier to understand for me, or like
Certainly.
you know, like
Yeah,
if I wanted to learn it, right?
that'd be cool, man.
Yeah,
To start collecting languages. Because like correct me if I'm wrong, but there are quite a lot of languages around the globe that use the Arabic script, right? Like it's not
yeah,
just like classical Arabic and Urdu, right? But there are like a quite a few like countries and languages that use it.
yeah. It's all like based on that script.
Right, all right.